Why is it millions of Americans, and I'm not exaggerating here, millions of Americans are so worked up about watching a guy who screams like a girl being dragged off an airplane? I everywhere I've turned in the last I'm going to call it nearly 30 hours. Everywhere I've turned, I've seen this video replayed and replayed and replayed, and the big evil airline being mean to this guy, and the cops being mean to this guy, and how dare they? And it just shows you that some people out there are just so filled with greed, they'll drag people off airplanes and slap them around. And now there were some stories yesterday. These were irrelevant. Some stories yesterday that the guy had had a drug arrest a dozen years ago. It's got nothing to do with his life today. I should point out he's a doctor, and I don't know how he manages to stay certified after what happened a dozen years ago. That's a bit more of a serious issue. It shouldn't be relevant to today, and I know that was one way people were trying to discredit him. But just listen to this guy. This is a montage that's been put together as this story has swept the country. But he's screaming here at the beginning. Listen to him scream. No wonder the ladies on the plane are like all upset because he certainly isn't very manly.
Come on.
That video, it's just shocking when you see it. This is a paying customer on United Airlines, and they overbook them, and the airlines are allowed to overbook these flights. They do it so that they can get them as full as they can to make as much money as they can, and they're legally allowed to do so.
I think that we can't judge one incident on one plane for the entirety of the United staff and security in general.
I think it's really important to keep a sharp eye on this and keep the heat on not just United, but airlines and law enforcement in general.
Clearly watching another human being drag down an aisle, watching blood come from their face after hitting an armrest and whatever. I don't think there's a circumstance that you can sit back and say this probably could have been handled a little bit better.
Well, he wouldn't have been bleeding if he didn't resist as they were trying to remove him from the plane. Flailing around like that, smacking your face against an armrest, yeah, not a good idea. And he's a doctor. He should know better. Can I add my 2 cents to this? I know it looks bad. From a public relations standpoint, the folks at United handled it very, very badly. Number one, it's airline policy, but they called in the government, if you will. They called police to come in and settle it. Now, the police officer is on leave because of this. The police officer is simply doing his job, but it's Chicago. Wasn't it Chicago? Well, because it's Chicago, of course. A knee-jerk reaction from the liberal politicians there to blame the officer. This is what we want you to do now that you've done it, and you've done it publicly. We're going to disappear and not back you up. But there was a movie, I think it was called Pale Rider. It was shot here in Idaho many, many years ago, starring Clint Eastwood. And the movie details how a powerful business is able to use law enforcement to carry out its bidding. But that's fiction. And United, unfortunately, fell into that trap, too, as well. The thing is, the guy signed a contract. What do I mean by that? Well, he bought an airline ticket that says, it's right there in the ticket, that if you end up overbooked, they reserve the right to remove you. And now they offered people vouchers. This morning I happened to see Stuart Varney on TV, and he made a good point. He said Delta offers you a gift card, which means you may give up your seat because later on you get to spend that gift card. Offering people a voucher for the next flight means simply that they have to take another flight. If they don't take the flight, then they don't get any break from actually giving up their seat. But it's in the ticket. You agree to it. How come nobody any longer can honor a contract? And they did it by lottery. It's unfortunate that this guy got picked on. But again, he bought a ticket, and by buying that ticket, and it says it right on the ticket that they can do this, he agreed to the terms. And then he decided he would no longer agree to the terms when it was decided he was going to be the guy who got off the plane. Why is it we're terribly sympathetic to him, and that big old greedy United Airlines is out to get that poor man and all the rest of us? But again, he knowingly boarded that plane, knowing that he could be removed from that plane in that situation. 9/11, we have a caller with us. You're up next. You're on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
You're bragging about your girlish figure every day. We know that
What is that guy talking about? I mean, you would think that he'd be embarrassed. The fact that he can't speak English and still keep calling the radio station? What the heck's his problem? Dude, get a life. We have another caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Amen, brother. You're telling it like it is. The man was trespassing at that point, and what are they supposed to do? But I would highly recommend if you ever get kicked off a plane that you do exactly what he did, because he's going to be very wealthy.
Unfortunately, he will. They'll overlook the fact that he agreed to this and then violated his agreement.
Exactly.
It's like swearing an oath. And thank you for the call. It's like swearing an oath and then saying afterward, well, I didn't really mean it. Well, if you did it, then you were a liar. And that puts him in the same category. But you're right. Unfortunately, they'll show this video to and likely a jury of women, just like it was all the women who were screaming on the plane. Oh, that poor man. Oh, that poor man. Well, again, he was obnoxious. he violated the agreement that he made. Assad violated an agreement he made. And look what we did to him last week. Now, we may have differing opinions on that outcome and what went on there, but I'm telling you, this guy on the plane violated an agreement that he made. He entered into a contractual obligation when he bought that ticket, and that obligation he knew said that he could be removed. The problem is he goes before a jury now. It will. He hired a lawyer. I heard that driving into work this morning. He hired a lawyer. They'll go into court. They'll show the video, and they'll point to this guy. He's 140 pounds, soaking wet. They'll point to him, and they'll say, oh, look, he's not a threat to anyone. Oh, he's so thin they could have actually just put him under the seat and nobody would have noticed. Oh, but no. These rude, rotten American businessmen, greedy capitalists, and the jackbooted thugs in the police department, no, they couldn't allow him to go save his patients back in, was it Louisiana or Tennessee? He was not allowed to go, and people died because he wasn't there to give them aspirin. So therefore, my friends, I want you to look at that loving face and understand that the heel of the jackboot was against it, and you need to reward him, and that way you will cure the fact that he was scarred for life. You will remove that scar, and he will go on living, and he will now be able to buy his own private plane. I will note, Berkshire Hathaway, which is the investment firm run by the very liberal Warren Buffett, actually has a big stake in United Airlines. The other day when the CEO of the airline came out and made a comment basically saying you did the right thing to his staff, he was right. But I wonder if Buffett and some of the other people saw that stock price dropping and suddenly put the, speaking of a foot to the face, said to him, no, 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 no. So now he's saying, oh, we're so sorry this happened. He's looking at the stock ticker and he's oh, I don't know how we allowed ourselves to do this. Oh, Mr. CEO, the stock just went back up. All right, forget it. That's enough for today. Let's go home. 9:14. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The video the other day of the woman who police threw to the ground in California, that's another one that's been getting a lot of play. She literally took a forearm and threw it into the face of the cop as he's talking to her. What do you expect he's going to do? And as it turns out, it's not on the video, but as it turns out, she was doing the same thing to a guy at the club she happened to be frequenting. At least frequenting that night. We assume she's a regular, although with that behavior, maybe not. And immediately it was like, oh, police brutality. If you walk up to a police officer and you're having a conversation and the police officer says, look, you're going to have to leave because of, you've been fighting with the bouncers, and you immediately throw a forearm into that police officer's face, the officer, he or she, may likely respond not only with a similar force, but with not just equal, but with a force to take you down so you don't do it again. Why do they do that? Because then they can go on doing their job. Because if you end up knocking them out with a forearm, or you end up, if they just stand there and just get into equal force with you, and being a man versus a woman, she should have realized this was, well, she was probably 3 sheets to the wind. I guess that'll be her excuse. They forced me to drink all of these beverages at the bar. I just was walking in looking to pick up a guy for a one-night stand, and then I sat down at the bar, and then these guys kept coming over saying, here, drink this, here, drink this, here, drink this. What could I do? Nobody has any personal responsibility in America anymore. We're at 42, coming up on 917. Telephone number to reach our program, 736-0300, 736-0300. My email address is bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. That's bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. It would be nice if somebody would go into this courtroom when this guy sues and lay it out like I did, and maybe reach people on that level where they can actually take a moment, stand back, take a deep breath, and stop with the emotional reaction and look at this logically. Unfortunately, look at the people we graduate from government schools any longer. There's no ability for critical thinking. And how can they sit there then as a jury of peers because we've so dumbed everybody down? We have another caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. How are you?
Well, I'm wonderful, but what did you call for?
Good. Well, the reason why I'm calling is I don't mean to change the subject, but I read something last night about, I guess our government or local legislation is wanting to make Twin Falls a welcoming city.
I talked about it yesterday.
Okay, I did not hear the program yesterday, so I apologize.
Ooh,
and
I don't like to hear that.
I wasn't able to, unfortunately. So,
well,
I guess I will go back on the records and see what I can hear.
If you go to our YouTube channel, it's there.
Okay.
All right, super. Hey,
All right.
Thank you. Actually, since she brought that up, I actually have a sign, and I'm not making this up. There is a sign hanging on the studio door, and it reads, "Official Welcoming Studio Here." And I actually posted a picture of that sign to my Facebook page this morning because I want to show the members I don't want them to get the jump on me and get ahead of me. I want to show them that I, too, can be civilized and welcoming. I want them to know that I'm a good-hearted human being, and that if MS-13 wants to come and deal drugs on our front yard here at the studios, we don't want to offend them and hurt their feelings. We're going to welcome them as much as we can. We don't want people to feel, we don't want to hurt their feelings, because if we hurt their feelings, they'll be scarred for life, and they won't be able to be self-actualized. Now, the council could actually spend time debating the need to patch some of the potholes, like the one I hit on South Washington Street yesterday that nearly took my tire off. They could be doing that, but aren't you so glad they're talking about being just like Boise and Sun Valley, those bastions of conservatism elsewhere in the state of Idaho? Aren't you so happy about that? And you know, they're sitting over there right now, wetting an index finger, holding it up in the air and saying, "Which way's the wind blowing?" Gosh, if we vote for this, they'll write nice editorials about me over there at the newspaper. And we'll all feel good for a day. And then when I go out and campaign for re-election, I'll be able to tell people the newspaper endorsed me. And voters will say, "Gee Willikers, if a newspaper editor likes you, then I must go vote for you too." 20 minutes after 9 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLI. Why don't you, if you want it to be a welcoming city, fix the housing stock. 3/4 of this city is just a plain crap hole, filled with dilapidated third world barrio-style buildings. Why don't you try and because all of those people you're welcoming here are paying exorbitant rents on those cheap properties that you don't fix. That's why. Take a short break. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX News. Thank you for the Eric, or is it Eck? Thank you for the email, by the way. Just got that in.